Timesheet Portal, or TS Portal for Evolution MX, is designed to work alongside the main system, allowing for individual users to submit their own timesheet requests. It's accessed as a responsive web page, and it allows you to use that on any device that you may have. It could be a tablet device, it could be a computer, PC, laptop, it could even be a mobile phone. It works on the basis of an email address recognition, so employees will be invited to join the TS portal by being sent an email invitation. That will then allow them to access the system with a password and allow them to make access to their own personal entry of timesheet information. So what you're seeing now on this screen is a menu that's being configured by you as a company, so you can decide what this actually looks like. On the left-hand side, we've got the main processing area, which allows them to make entry of timesheets and other things, which I'll come to in a second. The other tiles on the menu allow for the display of information that's either in the process of being input or has already been done so. I've got 4 tiles that I've chosen to show. You can choose to have as many or as few as you wish, and you can choose the content of these. So in the hours this week, we've got a summary of various different statuses, if you like, that the timesheet entries have been made for this particular week. You can see that there's a total of 7 hours have been submitted, constituting 3 separate timesheets. So each time you make a combination of the entry of a job and a number of hours, it constitutes what's called a timesheet in the TS portal. So you can see there's been 3 separate jobs that have been involved, amounting to a total of 7. You don't have to show all these individual lines. It's up to you as a company to decide what is relevant to be shown. So it could assist with the users to jog their memory to say, okay, you've entered but not yet submitted, or you've had submitted but not yet processed, or it's been rejected, or whatever it may be. So you can choose as many or as few of these different status indications down the left-hand side. You can similarly allow for the summary of the hours per day being shown. So in a typical 5-day working week, we can see that there's 7 hours so far have been entered for the Monday, but nothing else for the rest of the week. You could have a similar or a dissimilar view for the previous week. So I'm just showing here how you could have selection on different types of status recognitions there rather than the ones that were shown on the previous week, but you could equally have them the same for current week and for last week. And there's also an indication of a more detailed breakdown where I've included Saturdays and Sundays if that's going to be relevant. So choose how the display looks to assist with the users and their input and recognition of what they've done so far. And then the users will use this interface to enter the time. So accessing that, it will either take them straight into a screen which allows time entry, or as I've done so here, I've allowed for 2 different ways of me entering time information. And this is up to you whether you decide to use this or not. The purpose of this could be that I want weekly hours to be the way that I'll enter my own time, but I also want alongside that maybe to be a contract manager or a site manager who is going to enter what we call crew timesheets on behalf of other workers, meaning they're not going to be troubled to make their own submissions. They can all be made on their behalf by the site manager. That's not the purpose of today's webinar, just to let you know that that is one of the options that is available. We can look at that separately with you. Okay, now the way that this information is displayed will be dependent on the individual user. So when you set up the employee profile within Timesheet Portal, you're saying what kind of entry screen are they going to have. So with mine, I'll go in through the weekly hours and I'll be presented with a screen that allows for selection of the date, for example. So I could pick up on that and say, I'm going to be submitting for Tuesday. The contract that I'm going to be submitting against, you've got access here to a live list of the jobs. So you can select from there and choose for the job that's going to be relevant. You've also got a description. Now that could be shown, don't have to be shown, and it could be made mandatory. So we could be saying here that we have to put something in on that particular field, and that can assist with any approvals later on where they've got an explanation as to what the time was covering. On this particular interface, I am saying I want to enter a start and an end time. So at that point, I can just be saying that it was maybe 9 o'clock till 11 o'clock. Alternatively, I could just be prompted to put a number of hours in, and this is where you can set the preference on an individual user. Some people may just say, I'll put in the whole hours for the day. I don't want to say what the start and end time is. You can do that with more than one line of hours. So I've got here the total hours being brought through, but I've also got an option putting overtime. I'm not suggesting necessarily you allow the employees to put their own claim in for overtime, but it's just an illustration as to how the input could be on the number of hours rather than a start and end time. There's also scope to have included any value claims that they may have So if there's an allowance or expenses of some description, they could put in a claim for solely for the value of that. Now, at this point, you can choose whether you are going to submit straight away, which means it will go off for any necessary approval, or whether you just want to save it and come back to it later. And then that will be reflected in the summary screen that we're seeing. So if I just save that particular one and come back to my main screen, we'll be able to see that I've got 2 hours entered for this day that haven't yet been submitted. The alternative to that could be that I were to go in here on different job, maybe same day, and calling up that, I could then say that's Tuesday afternoon, maybe. At this point, if I hit submit, that won't expect me to necessarily go through a separate submission routine. So that as an individual timesheet has gone straight through and has been added to the submission for this whole week. The one that's previously entered hasn't yet been submitted. That's where the user could go into the submit if they wanted, and then later pick up the fact that they've already entered that one. We could go into that and we could enter the content of that and allow for the individual entry then that's not been submitted to be submitted again. Okay, obviously not resubmitting the one that's already been gone through. So that allows you then to manage exactly how the user is processing their weekly work, and they're going to be reminded of where things are. Okay, so everything that I've entered so far has been submitted. It would then be subject to approval. Now, this would normally be the team leader, but could also be a second level of a manager. So you can choose whether there's 1 or 2 levels of approval. Just to shortcut the process here, I've actually got the power to be able to do an approval, albeit of my own timesheets. A little unusual, but it is a possibility just for demonstration purposes. So normally it'd be somebody else logging in through here and going in through the approve mechanism, which would allow them to see the timesheet has been submitted. They can just tick to say that those particular entries are okay. Over on the right-hand side, we're able to see any comments that were put in there as well. So if you need some assistance with that, then they can be seen. The alternative to approval, of course, is to reject. So individual lines can be selected and rejected. The result of that could be that the submitter will receive a rejection email with any comments that the approver made as to why they're not going to accept that. And that would then require resubmission by the individual back through the system. Okay, so the approval having been done means that's ready to be accepted by the payroll. So this is when the payroll department would normally jump in, and through Evolution MX, we can access the timesheets section. Now, the managed timesheet entry can recognize now information that's been submitted through the TS portal. So if I, as the payroll administrator or manager, just hit the import, it will search then for entries that have been made and approved through the TS portal. Okay, and here we can see for my employee number, which is Mob, we've got 2 entries there for the days of Tuesday. So 2 hours on one job, 4 hours on the other. At this point, if I'm happy with it, I can just submit for approval. I have the option of deleting. I could amend as well if I need to shuffle overtime around or reduce the hours or whatever it might be before it goes off to the payroll. But even once it's in payroll, of course, it is amendable there anyway. So at this point, I'm going to submit for approval. The reason we call it submit for approval is because there could be additional workflow associated with this that's not necessarily going to make it appear straight into payroll. But in my occasion, I'm just going to submit for approval, and the system is happy with that. That would then allow for the payroll to pick up on those entries through enter pay details for the individual. I'll just go into that individual employee. We can now see that we've got a couple of lines being added to the time card. So the second and third lines for jobs 1012 and 1027 is as a result of what I've just put in. So they've both been classed as basic hours, 2 and 4 hours respectively. The other lines were from the earlier submission on the Monday. So it doesn't overwrite what's already there. It just adds to anything for the current payroll week. That's as if somebody had entered that now into the payroll. It can be amended, as I say. You can add to it, you can add additional lines in, but it's all good to go now and be followed up with the rest of the payroll processing, the calculation, the reporting, the production of pay slips, which of course can be emailed out back to the individual employee, securely tagged with a password, so they can't just open up the pay slips without the requirement to enter a password using these e-payslips module. Okay, so that's about it really in terms of the processing. That should give you an indication as to what the TS portal is capable of doing and how it could assist with the timely entry of timesheets subject to approval within the normal means inside Evolution MX. Thanks for watching.